Let's read it, and we're going to be accompanied today by a little bit of thunder and rain, which is all right. I'm glad we got the mic working because that would be tough to talk over the thunder. But all right, Mark chapter 3. Let me get there because I need to be there too. I'm going to read it in its entirety, verses 7 through 21, and then we are going to break it down a little bit and see how we can apply this text to us this morning. All right, so Mark chapter 3, verse 7. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great crowd followed from Galilee and Judea, and Jerusalem and Idumea, and from beyond the Jordan and from around Tyre and Sidon. When the great crowd heard all that he was doing, they came to him. And he told his disciples to have a boat ready for him because of the crowd, lest they crush him. For he had healed many, so that all who had diseases pressed around him to touch him. And whenever the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." And he strictly ordered them not to make him known. And he went up on the mountain and called to him those whom he desired. And they came to him. And he appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, so that they might be with him and he might send them out to preach and have authority to cast out demons. He appointed the 12, Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, that is, sons of thunder, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Then he went home, and the crowd gathered again so that they could not even eat. And when his family heard it, they went out to seize him, for they were saying, "He is out of his mind." All right, very interesting verse there at the end to think through. But first, our big idea for this morning coming out of that text is this. It's that Jesus called the disciples with purpose, on purpose, for a purpose. All right, try to do the Baptist thing here, all right, and do a little alliteration with our big idea. Jesus called the disciples with purpose, on purpose, for a purpose. Should be an easy one to remember. All right, so look back at verse 6 for a moment. All right, look back at verse 6 before this passage that we're in this morning. Here's what it says. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. So all the claims that Jesus had made up to this point, now the religious leaders are plotting how to take him down, right? Here's what he had claimed. He had claimed the ability to forgive sins. He was eating, so it's not just claims of what he did, right? He was eating and spending time with tax collectors and sinners. He told the religious leaders that he had come to do away basically with their religious system, what they had been following for thousands of years. And he said, "I'm coming to do away with this and to usher in a new way of doing things." His disciples broke the law on the Sabbath, and Jesus claimed to be Lord over that Sabbath. He was, again, claiming to be God. And then he broke Sabbath law by healing a man with a withered hand. So he had done all these things, and in the face of these religious leaders who were so by the book and so to the letter, right, and everything he's doing is going against what they followed and what they believed. So here's what's happening, right? The Pharisees' influence is decreasing. People are now flocking to Jesus, and people, the power that they held, the Pharisees held, was now slipping through their fingers, and so they're losing a grip on this power. And Jesus knows this. So what does he do? He withdraws from the city, right? The tension is building. Now it has built. They are plotting to take him down. So he withdraws out of the city, and he goes back to the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Now, it wasn't just the locals that were taken captive by Jesus, right? It wasn't just them. People were coming from all over to witness the miracles that he was performing. Look at the magnitude of the crowds, all right? Check out this map here, and hopefully you can see enough of it, and I'll explain it. But here's what it said in these verses, right? They came from Galilee, which is right there by the sea, but they came from Judea, which was 67 miles away. They came from Jerusalem, which was 76 miles away. Idumea, which was 85 miles away. Beyond the Jordan River and around Tyre and Sidon, which was about 40 and 52 miles away. And estimations would tell us that people were traveling 20 to 25 miles a day in that time, which means they were traveling for up to 3, maybe almost 4 days just to see Jesus. So these crowds were coming not by just the thousands, but many speculate by the tens of thousands to experience this Jesus. Days and days of traveling just to what it says, get close enough to touch him and maybe be healed or maybe feel some of that power. So they're at the sea, and there's so many of these people that have come that it says okay, Jesus says, let's get a boat ready because just in case they are pressing so much that we get crushed. Like that's the magnitude of this crowd. So we're having a boat ready, and here's why though. Here's the important thing not to miss is why these people were coming to Jesus. They weren't coming because they were seeking salvation. They weren't coming to have their sins forgiven. They were coming because they had heard that he was healing a lot of people, that he was casting out demons. And so people who were sick were coming just to touch Jesus to receive that healing, right? That's what it says in verse 10. For he had healed many so that all who had diseases pressed around him to touch him. So they were coming simply to touch Jesus, just trying to be healed, right? Maybe they're bringing a loved one or a family member to be healed, but they were completely missing the bigger message that Jesus had come to bring. And this is why the next section is so important. But people are hearing about these miracles, and they're coming in, but they're not really professing him to be the Son of God necessarily. They just want to be healed. They just want their sickness gone. They just want their disease gone. They want their physical ailment to be healed. They want to walk again. They want to breathe again. Whatever it is, like they're struggling and they want to be healed. So imagine this scene, right? Imagine tens of thousands of people pushing and pressing, and it brings this to mind. We were on this boat, and there was a show, and it was a Frozen show, and it was like a Broadway show, and we got there an hour and a half early, and we were the third person in line, and when the doors opened, we were in the 9th or 10th row because our line turned into a crowd, turned into standing like this and just like pressing, and it's like stressful and it's uncomfortable and it's getting hot and it's like just all these people, and you're like, oh my God, I don't like this. And so crowds are pressing, and when the crowd moves, you kind of move, and you're trying to make way. And this is how it was. Like they're so pressing in that, they're trying to work their way through them just to get a piece of Jesus. I guess what I just want to touch Jesus. I just a little bit of his power to come into me and heal me. And this is the scene. It's just madness and hordes of people. But there is so much work yet to be done because they still don't get it. They're coming for healing, but that's not why Jesus came ultimately, right? They aren't coming to have their sins forgiven. They still had to be shown and taught why Jesus had come. What does it mean to experience the power of Jesus, the power of God in a way that is healing for my soul, not just healing for my body? And so what does he do? He goes up on a mountain and he chooses 12 men that were going to help start this spiritual revolution that he had come to bring, right? It was about to explode. But Jesus, in his humanity, was not able to do it by himself. There was no way as a human being he would be able to reach the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that were on the earth at this time. Probably millions of people that were on the earth, right? He couldn't do it by himself. So what does he have to do? He has to call people, and kind of, in a way, he gathers this ministry team around him, and he basically commissions them to be a part of this movement, to go out and with specific purpose to go out and preach so that more people could be reached. Right? You guys have probably heard the math when you say, well, if I just preach to one person, and then they preach to one person, and then we preach to one person, and then it's like just exponential. All of a sudden, you got like 1,000 people that are hearing the gospel. But when you have 12 people doing it, and they're all preaching to one person, and they're preaching to one person, like it explodes. And so he calls these men to himself. Ministry team is formed, and Jesus explains what it's going to mean for them to fulfill the mission. So in the second half of this passage, right, we see a need. We see a need for this team. So they go up on the mountain, and we see Jesus appoint these 12, and we see him do this for 3 specific reasons. There is much purpose behind it, just like our big idea said. So here's the message title if you want to write it down, but there is a threefold purpose of the original 12, right? There's a threefold purpose, okay? Now, before we jump right into these, though, let's note a few things of importance. Somehow Jesus is able to leave this crowd behind. Probably gets in the boat and goes across and goes up on this mountain. But somehow he's able to get away to this secluded place with his followers. Now, by the way, the implication here is that he didn't only take the 12 with him, but he took his followers. Remember we talked about this, how when Peter and James and John and Matthew, these guys were following him, they had not yet become one of his specific 12 disciples. They were followers of his, just like the crowds were followers as well. Come with me, come observe, come be a part of, right? So he has followers that go up on this mountain, and out of those followers, he calls 12 specific people. So this is the scene now on the mountain. But here's the important part of this, the calling, all right? Jesus didn't ask these men if they wanted to be a part of it. Right? He didn't say, hey, raise your hand if, or hey, here's the straws, draw straws, and the 12 that draw the shortest are my disciples. You know, here's the box, check yes or no. Like, it wasn't like that. Jesus called and appointed them. In fact, in John 15:16, when Jesus is in the upper room with the 12 and a few others, he says, you did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you that you would go and bear fruit, and that your fruit would remain, so that whatever you ask of the Father in my name, he may give you. So Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly who he was calling. He knew their gifts. He knew their fears. He knew their personalities. And he looked at all 12 of those men, and he specifically called them out by name out of his followers for a very specific reason. Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. And we can get down into the weeds here and say, well, why would he then call Judas Iscariot, right? Why would he call that man? I mean, he was the betrayer. Didn't Jesus? Yeah, he did know that. Jesus knew how it had to end. Right? Well, supposedly, in how it ended for at least 3 days. But he knew the end of his story on earth. So Jesus had purpose in who he called, and he knew exactly what he was doing. And this is such a massive turning point in his ministry. Because up to this point, it's been Jesus doing everything. Right? It's been Jesus doing everything by the power of the Holy Spirit, and everyone has just been observing and following him up to this point. But it's been Jesus alone. And now, again, he's creating this ministry team, and they're going to learn, and they're going to grow with him, and they're going to participate with him in hands-on ministry that he's going to have. And even beyond Jesus' time on earth, they're going to continue to have that ministry. And there's purpose in it. Jesus calls the 12 to himself for a purpose with his mission in mind, and that's so important for us. Keep that in mind, because it is the same for us. When Jesus calls us to himself, he gives us purpose in it. All right. So 3 responsibilities that he calls his disciples to. Let's look at these, the purposes, but 3 responsibilities that they are given. All right. Number 1, the first purpose is just simply to be with him. That's in verse 14. All right, we're not really getting out and doing anything yet. It's just be with him. Right? He appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, so that they might be with him. And it has to start right there. That's where it has to start. It's got to start with personal experience. Because how will they be able to speak about something if they haven't experienced it themselves? How can you really, truly talk passionately and knowledgeably about something if you have not experienced it? Right? How are they going to teach this message if they didn't hear it from Jesus himself? Which is easier for us, all right? Which is easier, to speak from something that we have seen and then try to, tell someone about it, or to speak from something that we have experienced ourselves? Let me give you an example, all right? Some years ago, I did this thing called flyboarding, all right? That's me. Some people don't believe it. Maybe it's zoomed out on purpose, all right? But that's me on what's called a flyboard, all right? What that thing is this little, like a skateboard kind of size thing, and on the bottom of it is a few different, valves, I guess. The middle valve, you see that hose going down into the water? That hose is connected to a jet ski, and when that jet ski usually pulls the throttle, it's shooting all that water out. Well, instead, it shoots water through that hose, and then it goes out of the board, and it propels you upwards. So you're kind of like flying, all right? So that was at a low point. Believe me, I got very high, like 15 feet, all right? But this is me, all right? So what would be easier, all right? Imagine we're sitting across the table from each other, and I'm like, dude, I saw this YouTube video. It was incredible. This guy was on this, it was like a board or something, and water was shooting out, and he was flying, right? Or I'm sitting across the table, and I'm like, dude, guess what I did last week, man? I did this thing called flyboarding, and they strapped me in like almost like a snowboard on these boots, and I was in the water kind of sitting back, and he said, "You ready?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and he hit that throttle, and I just started moving, and I was up in the air, and I was like hard to find my balance, but once I got it, I was like, "Man, this is exhilarating. I feel like I'm kind of flying," and then I decided, man, I'm just gonna go for this thing called the dolphin, and I put my hands by my sides, and I just went head first into the water, and I'm like, I'm just doing it, and I did it like, I don't know, my dad was videotaping maybe like twice, and I didn't go very far, but I felt like so cool because I was like a dolphin just going through the water, and it was like awesome, right? So which has more impact if I'm like, man, I experienced it and here's exactly what it was like, or dude, I saw this video and it looked really fun, we should try it, right? So you see how like when you experience something and you can talk more knowledgeably about it and more passionately about it, then it's a lot more inviting and a lot more captivating for people, right? So if you're into this sort of thing, maybe there's other things that you're into that would be different. But speaking from experience, the point is this. Speaking from experience is building credibility for people, right? When you've done it and you can speak from that experience, there's passion, there's excitement, and it builds credibility. Like, yeah, man, I'd love to do it. I believe you. I trust you. I'd love to try that too. So Jesus is calling these 12 men to experience with him. Come with me. Right? Come and experience what I am about to do. Observe it, then we'll break away and we'll talk about it. I'll explain to you what's going on. I'll teach you along the way. Right? I want you to ask questions. I want you to learn from me. But I want you to watch what I can do. I want you to watch the power of God manifested through my life, through my ministry. But I want you to also be a part of it. I want you to lend me a hand. I want you to serve people with me. I want you to love people with me. I want you to experience the power of God along with me. And this is where it has to start with the disciples, and this is where it has to start with us. Before we can expect to have any sort of ministry impact, before we can ever expect to live on mission and have an impact for the gospel, we have to experience Jesus. There's no way that you can really have impact in other people's lives unless you've experienced him for yourself. We have to allow him to transform our lives, right? We have to learn from him. We have to grow in him. We have to attach our lives to him and be fueled by him. Then, and only then, once we are experiencing Jesus, we can never, maybe in glory, but like in his fullness, we can't experience him in his fullness. But as much as we can experience him on this earth, we experience him and we're passionate about him, and then that bleeds over into how we talk to other people and how we love other people and how we serve other people. But it has to start there, and then we can move on to the next purpose that we see, and that is to preach, and that's in verse 14, right? So that they might be with him, and he might send them out to preach. That's the second purpose that we see. Now, this is a specific task that the disciples, these 12 men, had been given. Right, we see that. So contextually, we have to look at this and say, okay, the third one we'll get to, casting out demons, is much like this, right? So the first one, okay, yeah, we get it, it's relevant. We must sit in the presence of Jesus. But preaching, Adam, like preaching seems very specific. Preaching seems like a gift that's been given to very specific people. This was the main reason Jesus came. He said this, if you remember in the beginning of Mark, let us go into the next town that I may preach there also, for that is why I came. So we know that's the purpose. So he gathers these 12 ordinary men, these 12 mostly uneducated men, and he tells them that they're going to go out and preach. So again, first purpose, non-negotiable, right? Like that's everybody. Sit in the presence of Jesus, experience Jesus. But again, this one, preaching, I don't know, Adam, that's not my gift. That's reserved for a preacher, right? That's reserved for a pastor. But let me just draw your attention to a few other passages to kind of get that thought out of our minds. Romans 10, 14 through 15 says, "How then will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent, as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news?" That sounds like it has global implication, right? Sounds like it has global implications. Yeah, but still, Adam, you haven't really given us the universal, like, everyone should be preaching, right? How about this one? Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them and teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. That is a commission for all. So we sometimes hear the word preaching and we immediately check out and go, well, I'm not a preacher. But when you look at that word, it's preaching, it's teaching, it's talking about Jesus. It's talking about his word. It's talking about the way that he taught, right? Like that's what it means. It's not just standing on a stage or a box in the middle of the city or, that was for, okay, got it. But it's not just reserved for people that are like out just proclaiming to a lot of people in public. This is for everybody. Right, this has implication for everybody. Again, while contextually we look at this and go, yeah, but he was talking to 12 specific people. Yes, he was. And we think today that preaching is just this role set aside for people who have been called to preach. But can I just submit to you this morning that when we take into account the other passages in the New Testament, it would seem that the role of all believers is one of talking about and teaching people about Jesus. We've got to get out of this mindset that when it says preaching in the Bible, now there are passages that do talk specifically about preachers and preaching and handling the word in that way, but these other passages put responsibility on the believer to talk about and to teach about Jesus. So this isn't just a 12 men or those who have been called. This is an everybody responsibility to teach. But it has to closely be tied into the first point. It has to closely be tied into that first point, right? In order for us to believe deeply in the truth of the gospel, enough so that we want to share it with other people, then we have to experience Jesus on a deep soul level, right? So think about this. Think about just for yourself, what are the things that you are most passionate about? What are the things that if you got into a conversation about this thing, what could you talk for hours about? What gets you excited? For me, this time of year is the best because March Madness is in full swing. And I have, ever since we moved to North Carolina in 1995 and got into middle and high school and saw just how crazy this area was with college basketball, I have been this is my time of year. We got married in 2011 in September of 2011, and when March came around in 2012, we got close to marital counseling because I was sorry, can't do anything on Saturday or Sunday this weekend because I got to sit in front of the TV. I got 4 screens going because I got to watch every game at the same time, all right? Things are better now, and you record it, so it works. But the last week, listen, first time, total random side note. But you'll get the passion and excitement that comes from this. First time since high school probably, that I haven't been able to watch any March Madness because we were on a boat with no service. And so I missed the second round and the Sweet 16, and I caught the Elite 8 games last night. So I missed the big upsets and all these things. And Jade's like, well, you can go to the adult bar and watch it. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I want to go meet Mickey or something. But college basketball for me, that is what I'm passionate about. I love it. When the season comes around, I try to watch. I'm a Carolina fan, so I try to watch as many games as I can. I grew up playing basketball. We do family brackets every year. And in student ministries, we do the student ministry bracket. And I had on my wall in my office was a massive chalkboard wall. We painted it with chalkboard paint. And every year I would get a ruler and I would measure precisely, symmetrically, and draw the brackets to the proper length so that it all fit. It was crazy, all right? Madness. But that's what I did. I love it, and I would put all the teams up there, and we're following it, and I could sit and talk about that for hours, the upsets and the players and the moments, and I just love it. So maybe there is something in you that you're passionate about that when you get going on it, it's man, I could talk about this. But I hope that also, if you know me at all, or even deeper than that, you know that I love Jesus even more than college basketball. Jesus, for me, I get chills saying his name, okay? Quite literally. When I talk about Jesus, it's hard for me to talk about Jesus and not get emotional. I can't. Love is not even a proper word for how I feel about Jesus. But the reason why is because I have experienced him on so many deep, soul-altering levels, like life-changing, eternity-shaping levels. And because of those experiences, because of how I've seen him work, and even like I hear stories, like I'm just talking this morning to Lisa, and we're talking about church, and she's telling me about her moment when she like really started to get it and got passionate about Jesus in the church. And I'm listening to her story going, that is amazing. And I'm like more blown away by Jesus just by hearing her testimony of what he did in her life when she was like, I love him, and I love what he does, and I love how he works, and I'm so passionate, but I would not be that way if I have not experienced him myself in so many different ways. And that's what's so crucial about when we try to talk to someone else, we have to have experienced him first. Now, the third and final purpose we see, here's a third purpose. The third one is to cast out demons, all right? This is verse 15, and here's what he says. He says, and to have authority to cast out demons. Now, we don't quite have the time this morning to completely unpack the implications of disciples being given power to cast out demons, along with the theological idea, if you've heard of this term called cessation or cessationism, which means basically that the spiritual gifts of speaking in tongues, of prophecy, and of healing ceased. Cessation, they ceased at the end of the apostolic age, which is the age of the apostles. So that's a belief that when the age of the apostles was done, those spiritual gifts stopped. So we don't see those anymore. So that's a theology that's out there that I'm not 100% behind, but we don't have time to get like all the way into that this morning. So how did they have the power to cast out demons? But we don't, do we have that power? I mean, we don't have that power to cast out demons. Like we talked a little bit about this, how we see that in other cultures, right? In other countries. But apart from this, we could do a mini series on it. Without getting into the deep waters, I want to just hang out kind of in the shallow end just for a minute on this idea. So what Jesus was bringing was brand spanking new, right? It was brand new. He was bringing a new way of thinking, a new way of living, a new way of loving, a new way of serving, a new way of looking at ourselves. And Jesus proved his authority by performing miracles, by healing the sick, by casting out demons, even by bringing the dead back to life. He exercised his authority and showed his authority in that way. In order for the disciples to prove that they had been given the authority to speak on behalf of God, as his mouthpiece, as his messengers, the authority to preach, Jesus also gave them the ability to cast out demons. Because if they were to go out and just say, hey, here's the new message, right? This is why people were so captivated by Jesus, because of what he was able to do by the power that he held. So by Jesus giving them that power, it was words accompanied by the power to do these miracles as well. It gave them credibility to preach and to speak and to carry that message. So let's look at verse 16 through 21 again, and then I want to kind of wrap it up and talk about us. So verses 16 through 21, all right, let's refresh on these disciples. So he appoints the 12. And these are all familiar names. Maybe you memorize these names and can say them, as a kid, and you learned a song or something about them. But we have Simon, who becomes Peter. We have James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder, because they were kind of hot-headed sometimes. Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, Judas Iscariot, and that's the man that betrayed him. And then he went home, and the crowd gathered again so that they could not even eat. And when his family heard it, they went out to seize him, for they were saying he is out of his mind. Now, it's important to lock this last verse away for later, and we'll get into it because Jesus actually addresses this. But Jesus' family, like true family, blood family, had heard about the claims that he was making. Surely. Even it says right there, the crowds had gathered so much they could not even eat. So Jesus is not eating well. Jesus is probably not sleeping well. Jesus is probably physically exhausted, probably mentally and emotionally exhausted. And his family hears about what seems to be him not taking care of himself, making these claims. You're not taking care of your body. You're not eating. You're not sleeping. So what this means is that they literally came. When it says they came to seize him, it was almost like an intervention. Like they had come to seize him, to take him and get him away, take him back home. Like, not prisoner, but in a way like hold him captive so that he cannot get away and take him away from that environment. They were concerned for his health. They were concerned for his well-being. They were concerned because of these wild claims that he seemed to be making, right? This massive family intervention. So even, not just the Pharisees and religious leaders, but even his own family thinks that he is out of his mind. And this is why later we see Jesus make mention of who his true relatives are. And we'll talk about that later in Mark, but remember that passage where it says, these are my mothers and brothers and sisters. Like this is my family. Not those who are outside the door calling me to them, who are my true blood family, but this is my family. Because they didn't get it. Even his own family didn't get who he was, why he came, what was going on in those moments. All right, so let's lock that away. That's for later, but it's kind of telling for what's coming as he starts addressing some of these things. So let's talk about us. What about us? Very simply, 1 Peter 2:9 says this: you, believers, are a chosen race. You are a royal priesthood. You are a holy nation. You are a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. So there it is. Why did he call us? What is the purpose? So that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into marvelous light. Why? So you can preach, so you can teach, so you can proclaim. That is an everybody mandate. And how do we get there? By experiencing Jesus. So just like the disciples were called with purpose, on purpose, for a purpose, so is everyone who is called by Jesus today. Everybody in this room who calls themselves a Christ follower, this is your purpose. Maybe you've struggled, these young people are like, I don't know what my purpose is. Well, start here. Here's your purpose. You're a child of God. Sit with Jesus. Proclaim his excellencies. Preach Jesus. And then let Jesus pave the way for you, right? Like, I don't know my purpose. Well, Jesus gives you your purpose. How are those 8 billion now people going to hear if someone doesn't tell them? How beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news? How beautiful are the feet? Now, obviously, that's not really, feet are kind of weird, but like metaphorically, how beautiful are the feet of those who walk and carry the message with them? Again, if you ever struggle finding purpose, just start right there. You've been saved. Jesus called you specifically, right? He called you. He looked at you and said, you, so that you can proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. And if you've experienced that, if you've experienced the life transformation that comes from being called out of darkness into light, then we should not help but proclaim his excellencies. That should be the natural outpouring of our lives. And that's what we aim for. That is our purpose. That's what we've been called to. And so together, again, these next few weeks, what a perfect opportunity to live out the purpose that we've been giving as those who Jesus has called. Let's pray, and we'll sing, take communion together, and end our service after that. God, thank you for this word, and thank you for this passage of you calling these men to a very specific purpose. And you looked at every single one of them, God, these uneducated men, these men who carried jobs that were not looked at highly, these men who were ordinary and maybe even below average in some ways. And you said, these are my guys. These are the ones who are going to take my message and begin with me this revolution that will sweep now for thousands of years the earth. It's remained and continued because there are people who continue to proclaim, people who continue to talk about your excellencies. And so God, may we be a people that buy into the necessity of that. May we be a people that experience you so deeply that we can't help but talk about you. That we sit in your presence and we plug ourselves into the life-giving source that you are, and we take life from you, and then we pour that out onto others, that life, that love, through serving and through talking and proclaiming. God, we pray that we would become a people like that, if not already, because we want that all would know you. So God, give us that motivation, give us that challenge, give us that encouragement this morning. And as we sing now, God, and lift your name high, let us proclaim your name now. Even amongst each other, let us proclaim your name, because God, you deserve to be exalted. You deserve all the glory. You're why we do it, and you're the purpose behind it all. We love you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
We can remain seated as we sing this song together, but I just encourage you as we sing together, just reflect, and as soon as you're ready, make your way back to the back table where you can collect the bread and the juice as we prepare to take communion.